Today, we'll dive into a powerful and impactful book, Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. It's a book that reflects on one of the darkest chapters in human history, but also enlightens us on the importance of finding purpose in life, no matter the circumstance. Let's get started. Viktor Frankl was a psychiatrist and a Holocaust survivor. He endured unimaginable suffering in Nazi concentration camps during World War II. But it was through these experiences that Frankl developed his profound approach to psychology, known as logotherapy. And it all stems from one central idea. When everything is taken from a person, the one thing that can never be taken is their choice of attitude, how they will respond to their situation. From this vital choice stems meaning, which Frankl believes is essential for survival. Let's start with the beginning of Frankl's experiences in the concentration camps. When people arrived at the camps, they encountered a monstrous reality. The first reaction wasn't just straightforward fear. It was a mix of shock and disbelief. Prisoners were separated into different groups. Right, left, some were sent to labor and others to their deaths. But the newcomers often clung to the desperate hope that somehow, maybe by some small twist of fate, things would be okay. This hope didn't last long, though. The brutal reality they faced soon stamped out any faint optimism. Seeing others brutally punished for the smallest infractions, watching the light go out from their fellow prisoners' eyes, all of this created a sense of despair so deep that for many, death started to seem like a relief. It wasn't uncommon for prisoners to contemplate suicide, thinking of ways they might end their suffering, perhaps by touching the electric barbed wire fence that surrounded the camp. But as the days passed, something happened. The human mind began to adapt to the unimaginable. Frankl observed that many prisoners, after the initial shock, experienced a state of apathy. They became emotionally numb, almost as if their brains were dulling their senses to protect them from collapsing under the weight of what they were experiencing. Instead of focusing on dreams, desires, love, or what made life worth living before the camps, the prisoners' minds fixated on survival. The inmates became obsessed with just staying alive. Much of their conversation revolved around food, warmth, or finding small comforts, things that once seemed trivial but had become their entire world. In fact, apathy allowed prisoners to act in ways they might never have considered before their internment. Frankl recounts instances where prisoners would, without a second thought, take shoes or food from corpses, seeing not a person but an opportunity to survive one more day. And what of those who made it through? Who survived until the camps were liberated? Many of them found their liberation wasn't an immediate cause for elation. On the contrary, it was accompanied by a peculiar disbelief. For so long, they had been in a constant state of apathy and despair that regaining freedom felt almost unreal. Some returning prisoners even felt a sense of bitterness. They returned home to find their families dead, homes destroyed, and cities in ruins. They expected those who had not experienced the camps to offer sympathy, to understand their suffering. But more often than not, they were met with indifference. They were told, everyone suffered during the war, as if rationing or bombings could equate with their experiences in the camps. But how did prisoners hold on? How did they keep their sanity among such inhumanity? One vital way was by focusing on their inner lives. Many prisoners found that by visualizing their loved ones, by remembering past happy moments, they were able to mentally escape their terrifying surroundings. Frankl noted that sometimes even small things, like a beautiful sunset, a bird in flight, could give prisoners a fleeting sense of peace, a sense that there was still something worthwhile in life. But perhaps the most powerful escape was humor. Even in such dire circumstances, some prisoners managed to find solace by joking about their situations. They would imagine how their bleak camp routines might look amusing in a different context. They made light of how mechanical they had become, dependent on their strict regimens even outside the camp. These flecks of humor were sometimes the only thing that could fend off complete despair. In the camps, freedom as we know it was non-existent. Yet, Frankl observed that there were still decisions to be made. Faced with life and death every day, some prisoners saw no point to making decisions. Others, however, clung desperately to the small choices they could make, believing it was a way to maintain some sliver of autonomy and preserve their inner selves. One example of this came during instances when prisoners had the chance to volunteer for extra work to avoid being transferred to another camp. They had no idea whether the transfer might lead to worse conditions, yet some opted to take the risk, holding on to the hope that they had some control, some voice in what would happen next. And even in such dire circumstances, some prisoners made small moral decisions, sharing food with those who seemed weaker or more in need, and in doing so, they preserved their sense of humanity. Let's now transition to how Frankl's experiences formed the basis of his psychological theory, logotherapy. The premise is that what drives us as humans isn't just our instincts or desires. It's our search for meaning, for something that gives our lives purpose. Frankl saw that those who found meaning in their suffering were more resilient, more capable of surviving the camps. Even today, research supports this idea. In one study conducted at Johns Hopkins University, most students said that finding purpose and meaning in life was the most important thing to them. When people can't find this meaning, they fall into what Frankl called an existential vacuum. This can manifest as a profound sense of emptiness or a feeling of life lacking substance, something many people experience in the form of what is called a Sunday neurosis. This is when, after a week of hard work, they suddenly find themselves unoccupied and realize how devoid of meaning their lives seem. Each of us is responsible for finding our own meaning. That doesn't mean that there's a single grand purpose for everyone. In fact, Frankl argued that life's meaning is unique to each individual and is determined by the decisions we make moment by moment. Think of it like a chess game. In chess, there's no single best move that works in all situations. Similarly, in life, the meaning we derive depends heavily on the choices we're faced with and the circumstances we're in. For the prisoners, the choice to look for beauty in nature or to help another fellow inmate provided a purpose that kept them going. Whether it's giving your new job meaning by finding a way it contributes positively to the world or locating a larger societal purpose, everyone's path to meaning will look different. But that doesn't make it any less important. It's these individual meanings that give life its richness. There's one more crucial aspect of logotherapy worth mentioning. It can also help people manage their fears and anxieties. Instead of focusing on external factors like what caused their trauma or how it makes them feel, logotherapy encourages active steps to control these fears. One of the techniques Frankl introduced is called paradoxical intention. Here's how it works. Imagine you have a friend who's overly anxious about blushing in front of others. Every time they fear they'll blush, they inevitably end up doing just that. But what if you encourage them to try and blush as much as possible? Suddenly the fear loses its power because they've taken the reins. Often in trying to force the blush, it no longer occurs. This technique highlights the power of the mind in combating what scares us. It's not about removing the fear. It's about learning that we have far more control than we think. Logotherapy helps us grasp that meaning and choice are always within our reach, even when life is at its darkest. To wrap things up, Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning offers a profound and moving insight into how our personal sense of purpose is tied to our every action and thought. Frankl reminds us that even in the harshest of conditions, meaning is the key to survival. And remember, it's not about finding some grand, universal purpose. It's about what gives your life meaning today, in this moment. So, as you go about your day, take a moment to think, what gives your life meaning? What drives you? These questions could be more important than you think. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you found this video insightful, don't forget to like and subscribe for more explorations of life's big ideas. And remember, the journey to find your meaning is a personal one. So honor it, live it, and cherish your choices. Until next time, take care.